Welcome, everybody, to the inaugural episode of Liberty Live. This week, we're going to be talking about cyber resiliency, which seems to be the new buzzword in the world of technology. Would love to welcome any of our co-hosts today. I'll let everybody introduce themselves. We've got Rachel from Cisco, JJ from Liongard, and Craig from Huntress. At Liberty, we're going to start doing this every week. This is our first one, so if we're a little rough around the edges, if I say some, it's okay. We'll get better. We're going to get better every week. Just like cyber security and cyber resiliency, this is a journey, not a destination, and we're confident that we're just going to keep increasing by 1% every week. So, with that, I guess we'll go in order. I'm Ben Johnson, CEO and founder of Liberty Technology. We're an IT service provider based out of Griffin, Georgia. We serve clients all over the United States and primarily specialize in Cisco technologies, but we do Microsoft, VMware, basically all the top tier providers in all the different technology categories. And we make purchasing, maintaining, using, and getting value out of organizations' technology stacks easier, and we attempt to make it frictionless, but things are getting more and more complicated as time goes on. Rachel, what do you do at Cisco?
Well, I first want to say thank you for having me today, Ben. My name is Rachel Oveno. I am the Global Business Development Manager for security, and I'm solely focused on MSPs at Cisco. So accelerating their security practice, everything and all things around sales acceleration. So happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. JJ, what is Liongard and what do you do at Liongard?
Well, as you know, Ben, we're part of your security stack, right? So Liongard gives MSPs the ability to report and alert on 67 different systems. So we're giving you many of those checkboxes that you need via that report. We're giving you reporting that's going to include mitigation, analysis of all those systems via your customers. We're giving you maintenance activities that checks the box. We're also able to give you the ability to respond to incidents quickly before your customers sometimes even know they have to happen. And then allowing your customers to have business continuity, right? Keeping them up and running and safe. So we're giving you breaches, visibility into those breaches, into security, and helping you identify malicious actors via those 67 different systems that we monitor.
Awesome. Thank you, JJ. Craig, what's up with Huntress? Why is Liberty a Huntress partner? And what do you do at Huntress?
Yeah, glad to be here. I'm Craig Landredo. I lead our partner success team here at Huntress. Huntress provides an MDR technology. Our mission is to bring security to the
what is MDR? We're talking to end users here, so we need to disambiguate and de-abbreviate as much as possible.
Absolutely. We do threat detection and response. So where Huntress really fits in is we work with your other products in your security stack, such as antivirus, firewalls. We're more post-breach. So once something does get into your system, it's all about finding it quickly and responding to it effectively, helping you to resolve those as quickly as you can to prevent a major breach.
Awesome. Caitlin, Brittany, thank you all for putting everything on today. They're Liberty's awesome marketing department. So thank y'all very, very much for getting everything together. So I'm going to go. I actually was not planning on doing slides, and I started thinking through this entire process, and I'm like, well, one, we've got to, what does cyber resiliency even mean, right? And, this is a simple, I suppose, definition. But then, I'm like, well, okay, anticipate, withstand, recover from, adapt. This just sounds like we're defining a buzzword, right? So, I went to Wikipedia, right, and got a little bit of an eye chart there. But what jumped out at me really is what most managed service providers, and I'm just going to start saying technology service providers because MSP has MSP has actually gotten to be kind of like cloud and kind of an overloaded acronym. So what most technology service providers, and I'm going to go through some of the evolution of this in just a minute, most of what clients have been consuming from the technology service providers has really been a cybersecurity stack. And, in the past few years, this actually, I think, was defined via a PPD, a presidential directive, just a few years ago. And, it expands on cybersecurity, and it brings in not just the cybersecurity portion of protecting your data or your client's data, but also brings in business continuity and organizational resilience is the word that they use. But it is, as I've said millions of times by this point, it's not if but when. So when it does happen, what are you going to do? Do you have a plan in place? Do you have everything in place internally? Have you partnered with someone? Have you bought your own SOC? Some companies actually have done that. And, so that widening of a definition here really is, the change, the switch that's flipped. And then additionally, it also brings in this concept of not being able to just give risk away. Right, like when in many cases, I'm in a lot of peer groups with technology service provider peers, and 24/7 firewall monitoring. Like I've actually heard that this past week. They're like, "Yeah, we pay for 24/7 firewall monitoring," and we go and look, and it's a feature that says 24/7 firewall monitoring. It's not actually a SOC SIM. People, a team responding to every single, potential security, alert or breach or anything like that. So there's a element here with cyber resiliency that brings in the end client as a partner to the service providers, and it really kind of speaks and leads down the path to really a much more mature definition of how we deliver our services, but also how educated. It also brings forward the need for end user client education, not just with the primary decision makers, but all the way through their entire organization, right? Because it's no longer, security is no longer one department's role or responsibility. Everyone in an organization has to be secure. Panel, any comments on this shift here that we've seen?
Well, Ben, as we've all talked about, it's a layered approach on your end, right? There's not one widget that's going to solve all your customers' problems. So you guys are out there, adding many tools like Cisco, myself, and Huntress that, are part of that layer that's going to help your customers be secure. And you guys do it very well, by the way.
Thank you.
And I would have to add to that. And last week we had our Cisco Provider Elevate event, and we had quite a bit security sessions held there. And one of the sessions that was held was on business resiliency. And we heard Wes Spencer and Ryan Weeks, right, of ConnectWise and Datto speak to that definition, that it's not necessarily a buzzword. It's really the ultimate, business outcome or goal that all organizations should be trying or seeking to achieve today. So I think cyber resiliency is I like the definition on the previous slide to really start it off, though I think to your point, Ben, right, it is more holistic than that, but it's quite literally, right, the ability to anticipate, withstand, recover from, which is critical, and adapt to those adverse conditions. And I think all organizations today are facing quite a bit of those stresses in various different areas. But I think and to JJ's point too, it's a layered approach, right? Layered frameworks, layered, whether it's, you're trying to meet regulations, privacy laws, all these different things that are super complex. Cyber resiliency is ensuring defense in depth is present within your infrastructure.
Yeah, I also like that. Then you specifically pointed out that security is everyone's responsibility at the organization. It's not just the security team or just the IT. It's that balance you have to find between having good security measures, but not making it so locked down or so inconvenient that your employees can't get in. But it is everyone's responsibility. So anytime that they see those phishing tests that might go out or any type of exercises that they're running, then understanding that that's for the good of the organization as a whole. And it's better to be prepared for one of those. That way you're not, caught out to dry whenever something does happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's in the Wikipedia definition in the fine print down there, it actually talks about it being a cultural shift. And I mean, I think that's probably the underlying thing, is that it's more than that technology. It's more than just your provider. It's a change in, your entire perspective on how you're approaching, how you do business. And, layered fabric. I don't know. I'll get to the right analogy. I've been having to rewrite all of my security analogies lately because they've all gotten blown up with all of the different breaches and stuff that's happened. But so cool. Yeah. So I love this meme. This is how I feel with vendors, and I know this is how most of our clients feel these days when we're like, yep, we've got to layer on another portion of the layer of security, right? I hate bringing COVID into this, but it's like you put on one mask, now you need to wear 2 masks. Vaccine works, need 1 jab, now you need 2 jabs. But it really is getting worse. And it's gotten even to the point that the federal government has gotten involved now. And so we're going to be spending a lot of time digging through this doc over the next few weeks. I think it's a Reagan quote. I may have left a word out, but it's like 9 words do you want to hear from the government or whatever. Or the worst thing you can hear is, we're from the government and we're here to help. So that's one way. I think a lot of my peers are going to be looking at this document. And I think the way I've looking at it so far, after digging in a good bit, is this is really more like your tax dollars at work. So, what is CISA? CISA was created as a adjunct to the Department of Homeland Security, I think back in 2018. And, they are responsible for all the critical infrastructure, in the United States, particularly IT security, supply chain, IoT, physical security, insider threats. Typically the things that you would see if you hired a managed security services provider, plus a surveillance and physical security vendor. They're kind of setting these frameworks in place, and much like the SBA, they're giving it away for free. And so this just got published on September 2nd. In a lot of cases, the local FEMA representatives are forwarding me data that they've gotten sent out from CISA about specific vulnerabilities, and this is not up at that level yet, but this is definitely a shot over the bow toward I think regulation and for the IT industry for technology service providers. As ironically, CISA is writing all of these requirements, and ironically, they missed what arguably is like the largest hack, supply chain attack, as they call it, with SolarWinds, that I can't remember how many hundreds of federal agencies and how many portions of the military used SolarWinds Orion, which is their enterprise monitoring suite, that can basically monitor all of these critical infrastructure pieces. And this is like literally in CISA's wheelhouse, and it got by them because it was a supply chain attack. It wasn't anything that it wasn't a virus, or it wasn't something that your your Norton antivirus or whatever is going to have a definition for. So things have gotten a lot more sophisticated. When I was digging through some content for this talk, I found this slide deck from 2002. I need to look this guy up, Tony Villasenor. It's a GeoTrust. It's the folks that were doing secure SSL certificates way back in the day. But I think this was the first time I actually saw the metaphor of hacking as warfare. And I mean, what's old is new again. That's literally, we went from, through this evolution of cybersecurity, or evolution of threats, back in the 90s, antivirus, firewalls, and backup, was enough. In the 2000s, we had to layer on intrusion detection, prevention, other kind of more active sorts of detection, as well as like DNS or cloud-based security. And as in the late 2000s to now, loads moved out to the cloud, loads moved back from the cloud. Now we're kind of in the fog or edge computing world. And people have, loads all over the place. And now in post-COVID, we have lots of businesses that just did what they had to do with what they had to do it with just to get by. And, we're coming out of that. And we're helping all of our clients become much more intentional with their technology spends, as well as with their security posture, and then going into some of the additional business controls like policies and procedures that, a lot of the kind of building a security castle type vendors, and most MSSPs are only, most technology service providers that specialize in delivering security, they leave all the business stuff up to the businesses still. And that's kind of how the risk is split up. So where we are now is this thing, this acronym called APTs. We have a volunteer that wants to describe APTs, or do we just want to let Cisco do it? I go to find definitions, but APTs are where we are now. This is why Cisa wasn't able to just, oh man, we've got a virus with SolarWinds, or the DoD wasn't like, hey, we've got a virus with SolarWinds. So these are nation states, organized crime, sometimes teenagers still, but there are, just like there's off the shelf office software and customer service software and data recovery tools, as well as some of the, there are analogs to those on the dark web, and, literally like you can just pay to become a hacker, cracker, cyber criminal. There's essentially the analog of like cyber terrorist camps, on the dark web at this point. And so this, new kind of threat that, encompasses all of the other threats all put together, all woven together. And, what used to be good enough is just flat not good enough anymore. I used to always give the analogy of, or the saying of how do you outrun a bear? And, you just don't make yourself a target, don't be the slowest runner. Right. And, you would probably be okay. And we heard lots of, and we still hear lots of objections from end clients around, like, well, I don't have anything that hackers would want, or my data, I'm not in healthcare, so I don't have any PHI, or I don't process credit cards, so I don't need to worry about that. And, all of that stuff's been completely blown up because, of looking through things from this supply chain attack lens, looking backwards, even going back to the early 2000s, almost all of these viruses, worms, bots, all the things had supply chain aspects to them. All of the threat actors used other people's software, and sometimes embedded themselves several layers up in other people's software to deliver those threats. So, just like, I look at things through the lens of every business today as a technology business. You can pretty much look at all of the current massive, crypto attacks, cyber ransomware attacks, all the stuff you read about in the news, and most of the stuff most of the big stuff that never even makes it into the news. They all seem to have supply chain related components to it, and I think that's a big reason of Cisa having to roll out some requirements, advice, and a framework for end clients to be educated, more educated, and be able to ask of their technology service provider. So their technology service provider can ask their vendors, how are you securing your own house? And for Liberty, we started way back in 2002. Obviously, things have changed. It's very much like warfare, very much like an arms race. And in the past, it has been a lot of buying additional tools. As a new exploit or hole would come up, we would have to buy a new tool to plug that hole. And I use this is Cisco and most other major corporations kind of decision grid of if they want to add a capability. So when you're looking at adding cyber resiliency or beefing up your cybersecurity stack or partnering, you can either build, buy, or partner. And in the cyber resilience world, this is what we're looking at right now. Momentum Cyber is actually, I think it's an investment firm. They've been updating this every year. I feel really sorry for the person that has to update this. It was like 2,500 vendors a couple years ago. I didn't go to the time of counting them. But yeah, if you want to build something yourself, this is what you're looking at. And oh, by the way, none of these things talk to each other. Very few of them actually talk to each other and integrate. So, do you want to build something? Well, a lot of people already built stuff. Do you want to buy a company that does all this stuff? Very possible, but would be very costly. So partnering kind of makes the most sense, and paying somebody else to handle your cyber resiliency plan moving forward. And we've been doing that, like I said, since 2002, but we've gotten much more serious about it. Probably around 2013, 2014, we had our first end user clicked on something, clicked on yes, and clicked on are you sure? And they got their home computer crypto, and it was like a $500 ransom. And this may have even been like 2012 because like there were no crypto exchanges. You couldn't just go buy it. We looked and there were five Bitcoin ATMs in Georgia total. And we sent one of our guys up to try to retrieve the like $600 out of one. And he went to the engineer's bookstore at Georgia Tech, and someone had I think it was out of order. And then he went over like on the like west side of Atlanta, and the night before someone had put a chain around the Bitcoin ATM and taken a truck and drug it out of the building because lots of cash was in there. And apparently, I guess it was in the area of Atlanta that lots of people dealt drugs. I don't know. So anyway, we ended up getting the crypto and paying them and unlocking it. But that was 8 or 9 years ago. Things have gotten much more complex, and with these APTs and businesses built off of it, they're asking for a lot more money. There's actually even a business model of loaning people crypto to pay off ransomware criminals. So and they even have, if you don't want to experience this, I'm glad that we've built up our skill stack so that we're able to handle incident response. But I don't want anybody to ever have to go through it. But like most of these ransomware people, they're like super nice. I mean, we actually had almost as good of a conversation with some of these folks as like you have with Amazon, in trying to return a book or whatever it is that you buy from Amazon. I know people buy more than books these days, but they're super customer service oriented. They have to go ask their manager to get you a discount. It's very very consumerized. So, this is the analogy, the slide I stole from Paul Barbosa at Cisco, around people putting together best of breed solutions. And I kind of like this analogy pretty well, because this is what security, I guess, used to be. And with cyber resiliency coming into the picture, it kind of it kind of expands on the analogy, or the metaphor outside of just the car and into the Tesla sensory systems and the federal government, putting signs on the road, and there's a lot more players with you driving a car on the road. It's not just up to you. So going back to, I think JJ or Rachel, one or the other was talking about, and I even opened up with, this is a journey, not a destination. There's tons of cybersecurity frameworks out there. NIST, the National Institute of Standards for Technology, is a federal agency that has published something called the Cybersecurity Framework that most technology service providers follow. And then additionally, there's CIS. If you do work with the federal government, there's CMMC. If you're a healthcare provider, there's HIPAA. If you're in retail, there's PCI. And of course, there's mappings for all these different frameworks. But invariably, most of them kind of all follow, a 3 to 5 stage kind of maturity model in terms of your security posture, your stance, your abilities. And, this is where the CISA guide goes into, making sure that Liberty's clients and all other small to mid-sized businesses in the world, are actually able to get from this unprepared and reactive internally and level up and actually know what questions to ask. For most end clients, there's still many unknown unknowns with cybersecurity, and a lot of the risk still falls on the end client, whether they're aware of it or not. Actually are going to talk through a few of the points with the panel at this point and try to get it more of a conversation. And we're at 12, so I think we've got 3 more slides to go through. So I don't have a hard stop. I'm sure Eric's probably eating lunch right now. So Eric, do you have any questions so far?
This is way above my menial head as county manager. So I appreciate it. It's nice to listen from you smart folks.
Yeah, well,
I'll stick to finance where I belong.
I hear you. Well, so this CISA Insights document actually gives you a checklist of risk considerations for decision makers, operations, as well as tacticians within your organization. And this is kind of where the blur between vendors, service providers, and end users, consumers of these services. That's where I think CISA, that's going to be where the line's a little bit blurred, because many organizations, even a county, may not have a technology tactician within the organization, right? So there's still going to be some of the items on this CISA checklist that you're still going to have to trust but verify on, but it at least lets you have a structured framework that's not. This is actually way less than a HIPAA risk assessment, believe it or not. So we'll get the docs out and shared with all this. Dave Sobel, who used to be with SolarWinds, and now is a technology, I guess, media guy. Did a webinar with Lifecycle Insights, I think last week, and they talked through some of these slides. And this is one of the other kind of major points. And I mean, they're taking these risk considerations down to the consumer level. And a lot of the things are things that we've already done anyway, like define roles and responsibilities in a vendor agreement. But in a lot of cases, other MSPs just say, hey, we're going to take care of everything, and so you can sleep at night. And that this is going to just completely blow up those types of service offerings, because one, that's not really true, and two, again, it's always a shared risk scenario, and the very best that any vendor or service provider can do is say that we're going to, all of this money that you spend, all the efforts that we make, we're going to actually make your threat surface smaller, and we're going to reduce your risk, right? And but when something happens, you're going to have somebody solid to count on to help navigate the legal, PR, and insurance quagmire that you're going to find yourself in. That if you don't have someone that has done it before, and you just do everything that your lawyers, your PR people, and your insurance people, and they're all probably telling you slightly different things. If you don't have somebody that's already been through it before, the time to recovery gets stretched out into weeks and months versus days or weeks. Additionally, if you have like a $2 million ransom, in a lot of cases, even major insurance companies don't have relationships lined up even now to be able to actually get their hands on that to pay it. And something that not a lot of people most people probably will say, well, I know this, but nobody's really saying it. It's like, even now, most of these ransoms are getting paid. That's why they're still doing it. And then, the fact that all of the bad actors are spread out in other countries, that's how, it's making it much, much more difficult for them to get caught. Jennifer, Rachel, Craig, any?
Yeah, the fact that you brought up the incident response plan, like that's huge. A lot of companies, they'll focus more on investing into the protect category and just, we'll keep people out of our system, and that's what we're going to focus on. But to your credit, to your point, then there's a lot of times it's if, not when. And so when something happens, having a good incident response plan, knowing what you're going to do, who you're going to contact, that could be the difference between having a couple of days downtime or having a couple of months downtime where you're just spending money and resources that you might not have available.
Yeah, absolutely. And you hit on something actually that, the easiest way to secure a network is just to shut everything down or lock up all the ports so like nothing works, right? That's a surefire way. You just unplug all your computers and nobody will, be very difficult for people to get in. Or you turn on like port authentication and lock things down to just like a miserable operational level. So, no one has permission to do anything on their workstations or on the network or on the internet. And, that ends up eating up lots and lots of time for the business owners, the people managing the network, and it just makes for unhappy users. So finding that balance is huge. And that's where having good policies to follow and, using something like Liongard to or other tools to be able to ensure that to have assurance that your policies match up with what actually exists in reality. Because we come in after lots of folks and they're like, yeah, we've got password policies. We have to change them every 90 days. Yes, we have that. Or people are answering insurance documents saying that they have all these things. And then we go and look and they don't have any of it. And, insurance companies are not paying claims now if you aren't truthful, or you think that you got something configured one way and you don't. And that's how the bad guys get in. So,
and
we're going to go ahead.
And Ben, let me add to that. It's not just password changes. There's so many other areas you guys have to monitor, right? Like, has their multi-factor been turned off? Are there stale users out there, right? Any open firewall ports? There's so many different areas that you guys have to monitor on a daily basis that your customers probably aren't even aware of, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Something else that we're also seeing more common now is, like you said, a lot of times when the ransoms get paid, but in cases where they're not, that it's not just the fact that they're demanding a ransom. A lot of times now we're seeing it be more popular for the bad actors to also exfiltrate the data and threaten, hey, if you don't pay or if you don't work with us, we're just going to blanket post all of this sensitive information on the web just for anyone to see. And that can really damage a company's reputation as well.
Yeah, I think Revit Group's one that they've got their own website up that tells everybody everybody that they've popped recently, and they will follow through on their threats. And I guess just like tourists in really awful places of the world, like in a lot of cases, tourists don't get killed very often because that would destroy the economy of whatever island country or third world country or whatever that exists there. The hackers, the bad actors overall have been honest so far. And also not just straight up malicious, but, it wouldn't take that, somebody being, having a smart attitude to their crypto customer service agent, and somebody breaks their word or whatever. So that's kind of where this evolution is going. The World Economic Forum, that they war gamed that COVID was going to happen, and then COVID happened a year later. They just war gamed just a few months ago, basically a supply chain based cyber war, and we're seeing kind of some, I guess, evidence and artifacts, of kind of like a cold cyber war going on right now, but it hasn't really escalated into, anything full blown. But, it's just like I said earlier with Chick-fil-A running out of hash browns, when people start going to the store and noticing that shelves are empty, or, the price of beef or, chicken, or all these things, you start going to the store and you don't have what you need, things start getting real really, really quick. So yeah, this was also one other quote, and we're 12:10 now. We'll give about 5 minutes to wrap up, and keep it to 45 minutes. Time just flew by, didn't it? Eric was asleep during the first part of it. He's on his lunch break. I appreciate you joining us today, Eric. I love this quote. Risk is never created or destroyed. It's simply transferred to those with the weakest contracts and fewest attorneys. And, that's basically, it's basically true. And, when you're dealing with, in most cases, technology service providers are dealing with organizations about their size, or maybe one factor bigger. But, for us on our vendor side, except some of the smaller upstart vendors, we're dealing with billion or multi-billion-dollar companies on that end, or hundreds of billion-dollar companies, in a few cases. And, their contracts to us are airtight. So, we've been revising all of our master service agreements to make sure that we have all the same liability releases in, but also that we're being fair about it. And we've also started, as part of our onboarding process, as well as our annual business review process, actually looking at cyber insurance. And we've got, we don't sell cyber insurance. We don't actually make any sort of insurance recommendations, just like we're not doctors. We don't make any healthcare recommendations. So we've partnered with a few different cyber insurance providers to actually do assessments, because in a lot of cases, sometimes people don't even have it and think that their umbrella policy is going to cover it. And in other cases, they think that, this amount's enough when they really need that amount, or they haven't really went in and classified, their data, and they have no idea that credit card numbers are being stored in plain text, or that their risk surface or their exposure is as big as it is. So yeah, with that, I think our overall approach, this Kumir Ritesh guy from Safirma, this captured kind of where we've been headed with our cyber resiliency tacticians, is to effectively reduce the number of intrusions. A radical mindset shift is needed. This is where this whole cyber resiliency thing comes in, and that it's a cultural change and not just technology that you buy. Leaders must redefine the concept of a strong cyber posture and relegate event-based security to its rightful place as an inferior approach to managing cyber risks and threats. So, this is point in time firewall monitoring, old school antivirus. This is this shift that has happened as we, all kind of took 12 to 18 months of hibernation, during COVID. Is it seems like the world, has changed. I think it already had changed, but we're seeing more of our vendors talk about it. We're seeing more business analysts. So this active threat hunting. So he goes on to say a more effective approach to prevent data breaches and intrusions would be an intelligence-driven approach where a proactive hunt for threats would take center stage. And I mean, that's how we've been able to keep, knock on wood, all of our clients out of the headlines, and get the very few that have been in the headlines back up and running as fast as possible. Is that we've the best defense is a strong offense, and we had actually flipped from just building that kind of cyber defense of building a cyber castle, and started looking actively at anomalies and things that looked unusual, and also things like indicators of compromise. At Huntress, they even go down into what they call footholds, which are like little bitty pieces of malware that gets left behind. That's why the thing keeps reinstalling itself. And with Liongard, this almost describes exactly what Liongard is doing. And then Cisco, actually, we've started using a fairly new platform from Cisco called SecureX, that if we go back to this, it actually is, for us, the glue that holds a lot of these platforms together. So we're able to actually see all of these alerts in a single pane of glass, and not in what looks more like a stained glass window. Any closing words, folks?
I love that quote that you just read through there. There's a couple words that jump out at me. One being inferior approach, which is great, and the second being proactive. Right, I think these are critical. When we think about the CISA report or the insights, why did it come out? Because there's associated risks with managed service providers. And so being proactive, and the conversation that we're having here today is absolutely necessary for managed service providers, IT providers, however you'd like to say it today. I think in simplifying things, when we think about an attacker in 3 stages, right? There's a planning stage, there's a discovery stage, and then there's the exploitation. I think it's fair to say that every organization should be working through and these same 3 stages, right? Planning. What is their incident response plan, right? What does that look like? How are they going to respond effectively and proactively to a threat when it occurs? You also have, the discovery, right? This is absolutely critical. And I'd argue one of the most important, components to being cyber resilient is knowing what is in your environment, right? What do you have? What are those a lot of these threats that we hear about today, yes, they're comprehensive, they're advanced, but a lot of the mechanisms that initially take foothold are simple, right? These threats are attacking people who don't update their passwords, or like different controls that aren't necessarily a heavy weight from a cost perspective, as well as, needing cybersecurity expertise to implement. So I think there is that concept of basic cyber hygiene that can absolutely be achieved by going through, some of the things that are within this report from a checklist perspective, as well as leveraging some of the frameworks like CIS controls or NIST that we talked about today. And then that third phase, right, is the exploitation. Well, as an organization, right, you should be doing that same things. What does your gap analysis look like? Where are your weaknesses? Where are your vulnerabilities? And kind of prioritize that risk as necessary to protect against some of those threats. And I think we covered a lot of that today, but just summarizing it and trying to simplify it, I think is important too for those customers listening in. Is we can really try to do this in 3 steps, right? Planning. Make sure you have your plans, make sure you know what's in your environment and where that risk is associated, and continually it should be a practice, right, of where are those risks and vulnerabilities.
I was just going to add, it should be continuing risk assessments.
Absolutely. There's changing environments all the time, and it's not just the boxes or endpoints or people's phones that get upgraded, right? It's employees that need to be retrained. It's organizations open up new locations or close one, or they move to a hybrid work, or a permanent work from home. So you have to update. You have to go through that same process over and over and over. So
there's a very delicate balance of people being your weakest link and also your most valuable asset. So that's a tough one, but something that, again, I think, we see as more business models are transforming is more of a practice, more consistent within that strategy overall is education is key there.
Greg, any closing thoughts?
Oh, just like you said, kind of bringing it full circle with this slide. We talked about persistent access earlier, and it's an illusion of trust a lot of times. If you're not actually reviewing your systems and reviewing your processes, you don't know what you don't know. There's some attacks we've seen where attackers will be in an environment for more than a month at a time, just going through and doing that discovery phase like we talked about. And so that's the key thing, having a good plan and reviewing that plan, making sure you're constantly improving and adapting as the attacks adapt as well.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay, we're right at like a while now. So we're at an hour. I don't know what we're at. So let's wrap it up. I really appreciate the panel's time, and I think we're going to be back next week, or I'll be back next week. If anybody else wants to join me, we'll continue the conversation, and we'll be posting snippets of what we're doing to social. So if people don't have a full hour of time to sit with us, they can get what they need out of 2 or 3 minutes. And with that, appreciate JJ, Rachel, Craig, Eric, Brittany, and Caitlin. Appreciate everybody so much. And we may be in a studio next week. So let's see if we have to have camera cuts and wipes and all kinds of fancy stuff. So let's see how far we can get in a week. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you,
Enjoy
Ben.
the rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.